Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Board Game Blog number 7. This is for May 30th, 2013. This week I was named Board Game Geek's Love Spreader of the Week, which is frankly pretty embarrassing. What it is there's a geek list on there, and whoever was the love spreader of the previous week, find somebody that they are like, or they feel is passionate and contributes a lot to Board Game Geek and board gaming in general, then they kind of name him that is a week, just sort of a small honor. And David Numanium, I can't pronounce his last name, he runs the iOS blog over there, helps run it, and so he nominated me, and it kind of got me thinking, sort of in the context of a question I get asked quite a bit, why don't you do a top 100 games of all time kind of thing? To answer that question, that's not going to happen for a long time. I've only played about 400 games or so, and so I could probably do a top 25. But it kind of got me thinking about the whole thing of games that I sort of, love, or they blew my mind a little bit in this whole sort of passionate side of the hobby. When you do reviews, especially after you do them quite a bit, you kind of have to start setting up filters and things like that before you talk about the game. People kind of expect you to have data and back it up, as they should, but there's probably like a little bit of innocence kind of thing that gets lost in that, which I make that sound negative. It's not really a negative thing, but you kind of lose a little bit of that sort of wonderment kind of thing that happens when you play games, and you have to sort of look at everything critically, and it kind of sometimes ruins the experience a little bit. And maybe I have a negative opinion on a game that I shouldn't because I'm a reviewer. If I wasn't, then I would just kind of take it at face value. So it's a very difficult kind of thing. I want to show one example of this, and then I'll talk about the 5 games. So I recently played, just the other day, City of Remnants here. Kind of had a big gaming weekend this weekend and played a ton of games. I only played this once now, and I may review this in the future, but it's a game that I thought was a blast. It was very fun. You're basically like different gangs in an alien planet that's ruled by evil alien overlords, and you're trying to vie for control of different buildings and stuff, and there's like deck building, and you get different characters that have different abilities. It's super fun. The combat in it is very sort of drastic, and you have to basically commit troops and different characters out of your hand and out of your deck to combat, but then you don't get them back right away, so you're very vulnerable. So it makes the combat it's interesting, because it's like, oh, if I go fight and then I don't really get what I want, then I'm super vulnerable and I'm just going to get wiped off the map. So nobody really likes to fight so much, but you're going to have to pick and choose your moments a little bit. And if you get kind of screwed by the dice, then, from a strategic point of view, it's kind of questionable. It's right now. But the game was super fun. So this is one example of like it's difficult for me as a reviewer to say, should I give this a good review, or should I kind of slag on it a little bit, or should I just not, just kind of let it go and let other people review it? So that's kind of an example of the difficulty sometimes of sitting down and taking the gamer and setting that aside, and then putting in the reviewer shoes and going from there. So that's just an example. So let's jump into the 5 greatest games of my lifetime. Now the first one, everybody's going to go duh, but it's Settlers of Catan. Now I don't own Settlers of Catan anymore. I have the Star Trek Catan, which is really awesome. I quite like the character abilities and things like that in there. But I don't think you can oversell having the trading that happens in Catan. Now the first time I played this, you gotta remember now, I'm coming at this from playing like Monopoly, and then crappy games like Dragonlance and Solar Quest and other stuff from my childhood. And then all of those are all the traditional things. You roll dice, you move dudes around, you move around the board, do different things. But now I sit down and you're trading me wheat for wood and sheep and all this different stuff, and we're sitting there haggling back and forth, getting testy with each other. I'll give you 3 sheep for that? And like, no, I can't do that to you. And that whole interaction, the dynamic of all your friends sitting around the table, I mean, that blew my mind. And I know it blew everybody's mind. And to me, that's just such an amazing just transition and leapfrog, into the sort of the next generation. Just that whole face-to-face, punch you back and forth, all that stuff. It's just awesome. Now, Personally, I still love Star Trek Catan. I really have kind of grown into like Cities and Nights. I know that's not really popular, but I really like that aspect. It still has that trading and that deep interaction, but it kind of feels like sort of a Civ game where you've got some extra levels of different types of buildings you can do. You got to fend off the barbarians and all that stuff. So personally, I've kind of grown beyond Catan. I don't really look forward to playing it, but man, just that pure sort of visceral interaction with all the other people at the table. I mean, God, that's just such a leap, you know. And I know everybody says this, and I know I'm just repeating what everybody says, but gosh, it sure just blew my mind, you know, back in '99 or 2000, and whenever I played, I was like, wow, you know, we're sitting here talking and you know, eating chips and all this stuff, and you know, it's just amazing. So anyway, we got that one out of the way. Next one is Lone Hers, and this is a game that is no longer in print. They've redone it as a domain, and the cool thing about this game that really just kind of blew my mind, it's by the same designers Catan, and I probably like it better, the base game. If you were to compare Settlers and Lone Hers just by themselves, I would definitely prefer to play Lone Hers. But in this game, basically, you flip up a card, it's got 3 actions on it, and then everybody can try to take those actions. So it's my turn, I flip the card up, and then starting with me and going around the table, we all sort of reveal a card which shows which action we want to take. If there's a conflict, then we can have a little bit of negotiation. I can sort of buy you off to let me take the action and vice versa. If we can't come to an agreement, we have sort of like a little duel with our gold cards and then sort of blind bid and reveal those. And then whoever, you know, bids the most wins it. And that was the first time I'd ever seen a game where you like actually bid for stuff, you know, where it's just like, oh, I've got this sort of secret stash of reserves and resources that I've got to, you know, calculate and figure out how many I need to hold back and how many I should put forward to sort of knock the other guy out. And just that the whole negotiation of the game was driven just by that card flip and seeing, you know, there's 3 possible actions. Which ones do I want to take? Which one can I try to get away with, you know, for free maybe? That's not as great as the one that I really want to do, but everybody's going to kind of be going for that one, so I can kind of slip in under the covers there and, you know, grab a little free action and, you know, keep my gold reserves and stuff like that. And again, that really just kind of blew my mind that that simple mechanic of flipping the card is going to cause so much discussion, so much consternation between people at the table. It was just amazing to me. Now that kind of leads into the next game, which is Power Grid. And that game was the first auction game where I really felt sort of a thematic sort of auction. Now I'd played, let's see, Modern Art and Raw at this time already. And those are, you know, those are Nizia games, and they're very just straight, you know, traditional, pure, almost auction games. Raw's not so much, but Modern Art is very much just pure auctions. And those are okay. I don't really like Modern Art anymore. We kind of burned out on that pretty quick, and I brought it back with another group of mine recently, and I just don't like it. It's just too driven by what sets of art you have in the hand, and I just don't like it because people can bid all crazy and everything gets out of whack. But we're talking about Power Grid here, and that's the first one where I would sit back, I'd want to put a cigar, light a cigar, and then just be a total jerk to everybody and drive up the price and really kind of manipulate this sort of industrial sort of world here of these curmudgeonly utility CEOs trying to, you know, outmuscle and outmaneuver each other. And that was the first game where it was like an auction I could see that tied into the theme. And then, you know, you're trying to vie for control a little bit on the board and block people and grab sort of those cheaper routes and things like that. But again, that was the first one where, you know, I could really set a point across the table and sort of snicker and laugh and say, you know, I made you pay like way more than you should have, or I got that really cheap by kind of manipulating the market of power plants. And that's, again, you get that back to that whole player interaction aspect of, you know, I'm just, you know, sticking a needle in you and being sort of taking on the role of these kind of dastardly CEOs and trying to really, you know, progress my company ahead of yours. And so that's another one that just kind of, you know, blew me away and everything. And I think a lot of people have that same idea. Next one on the list is Kahless. And this one's a little bit of sentimental for me. You know, it's kind of the first game that I bought so many years ago and brought to my gaming group at the time, and I kind of learned the rules and went on Board Game Geek and researched it and different things like that. And this is another one back to that player interaction, but because it has the player interaction with the provost and stuff. But the thing about this game is it was the first time I really kind of started to see mechanics sort of at an abstract sort of face value level, and how they related to the theme and just the overall flow of the game, because you can actually see all the buildings come out and you draw them down the road, and the castle kind of gets built in a pseudo sort of way, and the workers have sort of a personality. You're taking them and sending them to different things to do different activities in your day. Each turn could be like a day or something, and it really sort of revealed to me that there's a lot of different things we can do. You can dump a bunch of pieces in a pile and a board and shapes and art, and you can come up with these just crazy things. You just sit back and take off the whole like super curmudgeonly glasses that I sometimes wear, and you can just do anything. You can just throw down all different colored shapes, pieces, anything. You can just put them together and just come up with something. And that was the first game I was like, you sit down and I would play the game and I go, gosh, who came up with this? Like, who came up with this whole idea? Like, okay, I put a worker and I pay him, and then I've got to bribe this provost to maybe screw out all the other workers. And it's just unfathomable to me. And like as I review games and play lots more games, you kind of see the sausage being made, so to speak. You can kind of see the inner workings. You kind of lose a little bit of that. They just kind of did this. They threw card drafting with worker placement and did that. And he threw these mechanics, and the numbers, scale up this way with the different victory points. You kind of get into that whole thing, and it kind of loses its sort of wonderment. You get removed from that world. But Kahless was that first game where I was like, man, who did this? How could you come up with such an awesome thing? So that's Kahless. It blew my mind because it's awesome. That's about it. So the last game is one of these is not like the other, is Phantom Leader. Now, this is more somewhat personal thing. My dad's dad. Actually, today is my dad's birthday, so happy birthday to my dad, who will never watch this. But his dad was in the Korean War and the Vietnam War, and he was I always forget the name. He was like a munitions mechanic. So he basically, by the time Vietnam rolled around, he was teaching people how to load munitions onto the jets. And that's basically what you do in Phantom Leader. You have different sorties that you're going to fly, and you've got to load out different aircraft and then have them go fly a mission. Well, that game is basically the most important part of it is figuring out which munitions to load based on the mission and the type of objectives and bogeys and things that are going to happen. And now it's a lot of bookkeeping. Basically you load them out on the little cards, you put the mission, the weapons on there, you fly them out. The combat is like 5 minutes, and then the rest of the game is bookkeeping. You fly back, you keep stats on a log sheet, and that's it. And boy, that sounds really boring, and in some ways it is. The whole bookkeeping thing can be a little bit boring. But this was the first game where I really got into basically theme. And I almost kind of like rediscovered theme by playing Phantom Leader. Because I was able to personally sort of take a step back and kind of put myself in my grandfather's shoes, who's passed away. And it was interesting because one thing he said, I don't want to get too heavy here, but one thing he said to me that the Vietnam War really upset him, compared to Korea, because he would see so many people come back. Not alive, and I think that had an effect on him in some ways. And he never saw like front lines or combat or anything during Vietnam, but in the game, when you lose a pilot, that voice would come back to me, and I would see, gosh, this is not just a chit that come back, or didn't come back. It's a guy that maybe my stupid decision making and my management of the world here, of this fight. I'm at fault for losing him. And so, that's going to get you on a deep level there. So there's one thing that I sort of realized, okay, these games can be considered art. Because if I'm able to sit here and have that kind of experience by myself, it's a solitaire game, then that raises it to the level of art. I'm able to have sort of an emotional connection there. And so that made me really step back. And that one, basically, it partly has to do with why I started doing video reviews, because I watched Marco Arnauto's review of the game, and I was like, oh, that looks really cool, I'm going to get that. And then I started to think, and I think in the back of my head I kind of wanted to start doing video reviews, but then I played that and I was like, what? Like, why? I'm speechless here, because I was like, man, I shouldn't be thinking like this I shouldn't be meditating this much on just a board game moving chits around. And so I was like, man, I got something to tell people with this. And I know most people, like probably 99% of you, are probably going, well, what a nut. That's all right. But, it's just interesting to me. There is more here than I think the mechanics and how they're put together and the choice of theme can happen. And I know that the designer probably didn't even really expect somebody to have that sort of experience with their game. It's just kind of happened. It's kind of a byproduct, a side effect. Maybe they did. I don't know. I don't know what people think all the time. Every designer is different. I'm not trying to sound sort of altruistic about how board games can be, but these kind of weird experiences are going to happen. There's going to be other kinds of experiences that'll happen when people play werewolf together, or I see people do some different kinds of role-playing sometimes at conventions. Anyway, so it's an interesting subject, and it's never broached, and I really don't have the time to broach it, or care to that much. But they can be a gateway into other sort of philosophical endeavors, and most people don't really care that much. But yeah. So anyway, this is kind of a wonky episode, but I just wanted to go over a few games that were just, I sat back and basically was almost speechless, even though I talked for however many minutes here about them, and what sort of effect they had on me, and the group and stuff like that, and sort of those memories that you're going to have forever, and for the rest of your life with these people that you play games with. And yeah, the games are very important in that aspect of it, and you wouldn't have that fun experience of arguing over potato chips and beer and soda of Catan so many years ago without Catan. So anyway, so that's sort of a mushy episode for the love spreader of the week. So anyway, so just take a step back. I know a lot of people watch these videos. You're on Board Game Geek a lot, and I know I personally can be sort of a curmudgeon sometimes when it comes to reviewing and figuring out if a game is good or bad and all that stuff. But it's good to take a step back and take a breather and go, oh, okay, there's something more here than just that cardboard. There is a little bit extra, and that's going to be informed by everything that's going on around you at the time you play the game. So anyway, thanks.